All right, so let's get into the product backlog. This is going to really go into the to-do list of what actual work we're doing, and we're going to also speak about the refinement piece of it. So we want to establish kind of those best practices. What are the methodologies we should be using? Um, this is a little bit higher level uh, aspect of kind of that broader work we're going to be doing that's brought into the sprint backlog that's being pulled into the sprint piece. We go into a little bit more detail on this in the leadership lecture about release planning. But for now, let's just get into the product backlog itself, kind of some best practices and how to groom it correctly. All right, so if I can change the slide here, there we go. So we want to understand from the actual product backlog piece um, the business requests going on, the technical needs before we put something into the backlog. The purpose of the backlog, it should always represent a clear vision of the product. Even if there's no communication happening, this should be again in a transparent technology like a Jira, where individuals can read a few items in this backlog and see what kind of the vision is. This is an ordered list, so we know what the priorities are, top to bottom. This supports decision making in all planning horizons: executable, tactical, product release, and strategic. So, what are some of the bigger pieces that we're working on versus some of the smaller pieces that we're working on, and what are the priorities amongst them? This is going to be constantly refined. Individuals that spend at least that do this at least once a week tend to have more successful backlogs and have their teams work on the right things when needed. Uh, the product owner or business owner is responsible for the content, availability, and ordering of it, whereas the Scrum Master enables the maintenance of it, making sure that it's able to be worked on. It's not necessarily a meeting, but it is a responsibility of the product owner. And then the team manages to ready. So when is something ready to be worked on? Does it have all the requirements needed? Is it fully documented, acceptance criteria, things like that? Is it linked? Stakeholders continuously check and provide feedback is good in practice, but rarely happens in real life. Um, the vast majority of teams do not give access to their stakeholders to check their backlog. I personally don't even recommend doing that. It is best practice though to have your client involved with it. Now keep in mind they might provide a little bit more feedback than you're wanting, but either way, transparency is the name of the game in Agile. So use DEEP, DEEP, detailed, emergent, estimated, and prioritized. This acronym is great for guidance for managing the backlog. Do you have the right level of detail? Emergent, is it estimated? And is it prioritized? So is it coming up? Is it emerging? Is it well estimated? Do we have a good velocity target for it? Have we done something like this before that we can compare to it? And then what's the priority in the overall structure of the word? Backlog items are consistently deleted, and the average age of items is within the lead time allowed by customers and stakeholders. So this is great when the team can say how long it's going to take, and then you kind of get the business agility aspects of measuring how long something will take and what the throughput is. And then when you get really good at the business agility aspect, you can say what level of confidence things are going to be completed because if you've done them before or not, or if they're extremely complex or simple, you can start to put confidence pieces to it. But that's a whole nother topic. Not all customers' requests are added to the backlog. Product owner says no. This is very important for the product owner to say no sometimes when something is out of scope or does not have applicability. I had a client once that we were working with their accounting department for a new process that they would go through their tax division. they randomly requested that their development team also make a timekeeping software. That has nothing to do with the process. So it's okay to say no in that instance when something is completely off topic. So this supports organizational needs for information and forecasting. So when you have a good prioritized backlog that's well estimated, you can say how long it's going to take to accomplish things and then start to plan out. We keep talking about how Agile breaks things down in very small increments, and it almost seems like it doesn't look on the horizon. However, when you have a good backlog, it does the opposite. It gives you a great detailed picture of the horizon and how long things are going to take. Within this backlog, you should kind of have the age of how long things have been sitting there, delivery targets, customer satisfaction, what's going to satisfy the customer. And this should be at least 2 sprints worth. So say you're running 2-week sprints, that's at least 1 month worth of work. If you're running longer, even better. Now, something to keep in mind here is cycle time and lead time. These are Agile metrics in the metrics lecture. By keeping your backlog up to date, you can see how long something's sitting there versus how long it actually took to be worked on. Contents of the backlog are transparent, available, and consistently up to date. So do we have a backlog that is well groomed? We'll get into the grooming in a minute. Team develops at least 10% of its capacity towards maintaining the backlog. So the team can spend, this seems like a lot, I know, but keep in mind that backlog really is the foundation for all the work they're going to do. Entire team participates in this, of the user stories and creation and maintenance, regardless of the role. If they are working on something, if they are producing something, likely it needs to be in the backlog at the product level. Now, from a refinement standpoint, here's where kind of just good hygiene comes into place. The backlog refinement is almost rapid fire, going down your stories. We want to review the stories, sprints, the estimation, the prioritization of each one. We understand how it fits to the larger portfolio view and what epics ties to it. So use that link button if you're using a software. Link it to an epic. The product owner owns this while the Scrum Master facilitates it, and the team simply participates in it. And a lot of these same tendencies that we had in the sprint planning meeting apply in this session as well. It's not best practice, but there are some Agile groups that we've worked with that prefer to have this session and the sprint planning session at the same time to simply eliminate a ceremony. It gives them individuals back 2 or 3 hours a sprint. Again, that is not best practice. The team has dedicated amount of its time to this activity, and again, best practice is 10%, but it will help overall production when you have a good list to go off of. The stories contain minimal technical solutioning during this, so you have good ideas in here, decent amount of detail in here, but we're not going down to the task level like we will in a sprint planning session, and that's why the two should be separated. The product owner really needs to communicate what the goal is for the upcoming sprint as well. Again, that constant communication of what's the goal, what are we doing, where are we going, how's this fit into a larger term, pieces like that. And the product owner also communicates the risk within here as well, right? So something that might be complex that they haven't communicated well, or a side customer request that somewhat applies to it. What are some risks? Is the customer happy currently? And this can lead to what are called Agile spikes. This is also where you kind of address Agile spikes that I mentioned during the planning session. Items that you might have estimated takes 6 story points, but in reality you're on story point 30 now. That will be considered a spike, something you just can't get past. And that's when you kind of set a deadline for the spikes as well during this backlog refinement. Is this need to be broken down even more because we can't solve it currently? Have that conversation. This is more of an individualized activity, but it will lead to post conversations when you see items in the backlog that just don't make sense, or you think you can knock out quickly, whatever it might be. It leads to good transparency and conversation. And the team again sets their target of what they can get completed. So the team sees this well prioritized backlog, and then they can take that and run with it. All right, next, let's go ahead and get into the common challenges that I've personally seen. I've mentioned kind of the merging of meetings that happens. Now, so of course there will be work that takes longer than expected. However, this is where the Scrum Master can ensure everyone is staying on task and the product owner still has that good vision communicated. Sprint outcomes only shown in a presentation, and this is a really good session to bring your work to life, where you can kind of say, hey, this is what the end product might look like based upon the backlog and what we have in it. Team discusses technical solutions during refinement. This is not, again, a time to start solutioning. This is making sure your to-do list is nice, is basically all it is, and up to date. Team spends refinement time during sprint planning. Again, this is a common mistake to merge these two meetings. I have seen it done successful sometimes, but that's, again, not best practice. Only product owners and Scrum Masters refine, write stories. No, it's okay for the team to write stories. They can do that, and they should be refining things too. Product owner uses refinement to determine what to do next. Not the time. Go to planning, go to PI planning, release planning, things like that. Spike stories compromising significant amount of capacity. I've already mentioned this. Try to break down those spikes or bring in external parties to support, and then the team not spend enough time on it. Figure out what works best for your group. You're probably going to edit the amount of time, but it should be ever evolving and changing. So the key takeaway from me to you on the sprint on the backlog refinement, the product backlog as a whole, is this is a to-do list that should be well maintained and well prioritized. I personally write down my to-do list each day, almost like my own little mini Kanban board. I'm sure most of you do as well. Make sure that it's well prioritized and right. Take it a step further and estimate how long each of those little to-do items are going to take. It starts to change the dynamic and chemistry in your brain a little bit when you see how long something's going to take and how many hours you actually have in a day. So just be clear about your intentions with the backlog so that other team members can observe it correctly. And this will lead to almost an accelerated throughput for the team when they have this good backlog that is well established, well written, well prioritized. People will start to actually gamify this of competing with each other to see how many they can get done, because they don't have to deal with the minutia of hunting down a resource or figuring out where this is coming from or what this actually is related to, or does it link to an epic. If all those little things are taken care of, the team can really run with this. So again, the backlog, very critical to Agile. This is where all work is drawn from and needs to be well maintained.